So this is the meeting of the Delaware County Fish and Game Commission called to order. Jackie, could you read the minutes at 5:31? Pardon me. Roll call, excuse me. Present. Here.
Here.
Here. So the first item on the agenda would be public comment. If anyone has a public comment on something other than potentially something on our list of an agenda, it's time to speak now, if you would, please. Okay, so I see no public comment at this moment, so we'll move on, please, to status reports. Are there any brief status reports in the beginning of the meeting today? Oh, the answer is no. So I guess the first item on our agenda is a presentation by Jeff Stackhouse on the Aleutian goose hunting.
Okay, thank you. My name is Jeff Stackhouse. I'm with UC Cooperative Extension as the farm advisor for Humboldt and Del Norte counties. And essentially what that means is I work with commercial agricultural entities, livestock only. There's other folks in my office that do trees. There's a forestry advisor. There's family nutrition and youth education. Pretty famous program comes out of our office called 4-H that most of you probably know about. But I primarily work with dairymen and commercial beef industry businesses within the two counties. And I was approached this spring by primarily Arcata residents that were pretty significantly impacted by goose depredation issues. And part of the reason was because of the drought that we had. These folks primarily are irrigated lands producers. So when the geese were coming south, they would hit them the hardest in the fall because they have the highest quality forages. And then again in the spring, the geese came back as they always do. But in the spring, they spread out and everyone kind of bears the burden of those animals equally in terms of landowners on the bottom because we've had precipitation, which then gets growth. But those producers specifically came to me because they were previously part of the Aleutian Goose Working Group, and those individuals were Jay Russ, Pete Bussman, Dean Hunt, Fred and Sandy Hanks. And they asked Jack Rice and I, who is on the Zoom, I think, or he was planning on it. Okay, perfect.
Excuse me, Jack Rice and Justin Mora were going to Zoom, or someone else might also.
So at any rate, so Jack and I were asked by these folks to try to attempt to restart the Aleutian Goose Working Group and figure out what the options are to move these geese around, see if we can get more killed. The target population, and I'm plus or minus a few thousand, is approximately 270,000. Or the target population is 60,000, and currently there's about 270,000 of these things. At any rate, is Jack able to speak? Because he's kind of been the ringleader on getting this stuff organized. So if it's all right with the commissioners, I'd like to let him see if he has anything to contribute. And then I'll go through kind of the steps of how we got to where we are. And I'd like to give out some handouts to folks in the room if that's possible. I don't know if that's allowed or what. But essentially I'm going to hand out 2 different copies of letters, one of which is a relatively vague letter that is coming from the Humboldt County Fish and Game Commission, which I serve on. And the reason that letter is vague is because we as commissioners had a hard time coming to a consensus on what the specific date changes should be. So at the end of a 3-hour discussion, I finally just looked at the group and said, hey folks, I'm willing to write a letter. Can we get consensus that we want to move, the date forward? Everybody said yes. So we've picked a few items and left the specifics out. Another letter I'll hand out is the latest draft from the Aleutian Goose Working Group, where we're asking different entities and specifically people that were part of that effort to sign on to that letter. And then there's another email from Jack Rice to the Aleutian Goose Working Group that was basically forwarded from Melanie Weaver, who's the state biologist. And that email has essentially a series of dates that she suggested as potential changes. So long story short, the goose season can only be 107 days long, and you get the choice of any set of dates from September 1st until March 10th. If you want to play outside of that window of September 1st to March 10th, it is an act of Congress and has to be changed by the Migratory Bird Act, including all of the nations within it. So pretty big lift to try to get outside of those dates. So it's kind of a decision amongst the two counties of figuring out, okay, with these 107 days, where do we think they're best used? So I want to pass that out for you folks to see kind of how we got to the option we got to. And then the third thing I would like to pass around is the Aleutian Goose Working Group email list, and if anyone would like to add their name to it, please do so. So while I hand those out, Jack, if you have anything to say, that'd be great.
You guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So Jack Rice with the, I'm sort of this coordinator for the Aleutian Goose Working Group, and we sort of fell into that position. Well, I was working with some of the local landowners, like Jeff said, they had reached out. I'm affiliated with the Cattlemen's, and I was helping fill just kind of a role of coordinating the efforts and trying to get the Aleutian Goose Working Group restarted. From the very beginning, the intention had been to include as many people as were interested in being part of it. And I really want to apologize because it was clear that we missed folks in Del Norte. It was no excuses for doing that, but it was unintentional. We tried to include names and contact info for some folks we had in Del Norte County, and that didn't work as well as we would have hoped. So the reason it's so important is I think everyone knows our understanding is to get these changes made that Jeff is going to talk about, we'll talk about more. You need most everybody in the two counties needs to be supportive of those changes. So it's really something where people need to work together. And I want to do what I can to try to help the group add the right voices to it, make sure that they've communicated so that at the end of the day, we can make an ask, hopefully, to the commission to change the dates in a way that'll help improve things. The real catalyst here was Humboldt County. Obviously, that has to work for Del Norte as well. And it seems like there's a way to do that, but that's just the introduction. And again, I apologize for not doing a good job reaching out to folks in Del Norte County.
Do you need help? I can help pass those. Yeah, so that one hasn't changed. The one from Virginia Bass hasn't changed. The one from Jack Rice got a little bit of wordsmithing this morning due to an ask of Melanie Weaver around the share program. Would anyone else like a copy of this? So essentially what I just passed out, Jack, just so you know, is I just passed out the dates that Melanie Weaver gave the Aleutian Goose Working Group that we discussed back in the middle of November. So one of the things I'd also like to apologize for, you know, Jack apologized for not doing a good job of including Del Norte County, and that really was my fault because I agreed to come up and speak to Del Norte County for the Aleutian Goose Working Group, specifically to this group, and the dates just didn't work out, and the November meeting that I was hoping to come to didn't work out on getting together and having that done. So we basically came up against a pretty tight timeline, where as you can see this email from Jack, well, from Melanie Weaver through Jack to the rest of the group with the season dates, you can see basically there's 6 options about moving the season forward. The first set of options are having the season open the first Saturday in October with different allocations of those 107 days. The second suite of 3 options is opening the third Saturday in October, which is the same day as the current waterfowl season opener for ducks. So those were kind of the 2 things that Melanie suggested those were the 2 options Melanie suggested, and these were the 6 options that were discussed by us. But as you can see, we got these on November 8th, and Melanie asked that we provide her letters from every organization in both Humboldt and Del Norte County by the first week of December. So it hasn't been as though this conversation's been happening for a long time. It's been quite short, and luckily for the Humboldt County Fish and Game Commission, I have a standing agenda item of the Aleutian Goose, so we were able to take action without having to wait until December with the Browns Act. So in November, I was able to present to our group, and we were able to have a letter written, which now is waiting for the Humboldt County Board of Supervisors to get on their agenda so they can vote on it. So working diligently to try to meet the deadlines that Melanie asked us to, but it's proven to be pretty difficult to get that much turnaround from as many organizations as we have in the 2 counties. So essentially, what the Aleutian Goose Working Group decided to do was they went, as you can see in the letter that has the highlighted option that Jack wrote, the group came to a consensus to support option 2 of the first Saturday in October. And that, you know, that was over a couple hours, well, like a 1-hour discussion, I think. And that is essentially what is going into the letter that you have a copy of. And I guess at this point, I don't really have a whole lot else to ramble on about except to ask you all if you have any questions of either myself or Jack in terms of clarification. And then after that, I guess I just would like to get input on what you would like to see. And if there's something different and we can come to a consensus across the multitude of groups, I think that'd be an easy decision for the Fish and Game staff at the state level. If there's multiple different directions, I think the Fish and Game staff have a little work cut out for them, but that's their job as state representatives. So I think no matter what we come up with is really fine. I think we just got to figure it out.
There's a meeting next week with the Fish and Game Commission on the 19th. Is that correct? To discuss this item?
With the State Fish and Game Commission? Oh, I hadn't known that they were discussing that.
That's my understanding, whatever the 19th is, I'm assuming. Yeah, I thought that this in particular is on their agenda.
Jack, were you aware that it was on the state's agenda?
I was not. Is that because they need to make the initial request now in order to begin the process to track the rates, though? I didn't have a really perfect understanding of the process.
Yeah, I don't have a clear understanding either.
From looking at a preliminary agenda last week,
Okay.
Is there some measurement of how many acreage in Humboldt County and Del Norte County are actually used by the geese? And how much of that's public land and how much of that's private? In round numbers of some meaningful magnitude? If you don't know, it's okay. I'm just asking.
No, I don't know, but I think Jack has probably a pretty good idea from the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act work he's been doing. Do you know those numbers, Jack?
I didn't hear the question, sorry.
He was asking the total acreage in Humboldt County that's being used by the geese, and my immediate knee-jerk reaction was it's about the same as the Eel River Sustainable Groundwater Management Act acreage, if I had to guess. So,
Oh, that could be true. We have about, I think it's 13,000 acres irrigated in Lower Eel, but that doesn't really catch the Arcata bottoms, and that probably includes some ground that the geese don't really get impact. But it's probably averages, you could be right, it could average around the same.
that'd be my guess. In Humboldt County, approximately, let's just call it let's call it 12,000 acres plus or minus 5,000 acres of private ground, and let's call it, 1,000 acres plus or minus, 1,000 acres plus or minus 500 acres of public ground. If that gives you real rough ballpark numbers.
I'm looking for something comparative in Del Norte County, how much of it we don't have land and how much of it's public land that the geese use. I don't know that there is any public land managed for geese.
Probably in Del Norte County, it's 4,000 acres. We're up more or less, give or take 1,000 of private land that's available. And public land depends on the day.
Well, when they closed Pala, they closed the only public land available for honeybees.
For the geese.
I'm talking actually managed for geese, whether it's incidental because it's a ranch, but there is no public land in this county that I know of.
Yeah, there is zero public land in Del Norte County that's being managed by some public agency for any type of short grass production at all. And in Humboldt County, there was a complete lack of management on the fish and wildlife areas because of the lease problem. And that was just recently resolved, evidently, and the leases, I understand, were just recently resolved, and there was hay taken off of that land. And I don't know how many acres that is, but that's 300 or 400 or 500,
Yeah.
maybe.
So the only ground in Humboldt County today, specifically, that I would consider suitable goose habitat is on the federal wildlife refuge. They're across from the College of the Redwoods. Like, they're doing a pretty good job, in my opinion. But the rest of the public ground, I would never expect to see a goose land on it. Oh yeah, the city ground. Yep. Yeah, I forgot about Arcata City property. And then also the land trust has some little small in-holdings scattered about that the geese also use. I was just stuck in the state and federal mindset there. Thanks.
Just as information, it so happens on some old paperwork, the original Aleutian Goose Committee, I have in my hand the name of the people. There were 21 public, state, etc. representatives and 9 Del Norte County landowners. 0 from Humboldt County, because at that time there was no goose problem in Humboldt County. So the original Aleutian Goose Working Group started here with no one from Humboldt County, and it's kind of changed, hasn't it? Humboldt County is now kind of anxious about geese, and the Del Norte County folks are much less concerned because they don't come here anymore, for good reason. For good reason, yeah. I think we can recognize someone in the audience. Yes or no? Sure. You need to come to the microphone to ask the question, however, so everybody can really hear. That would be better.
Hi, Commissioners, thank you. I just wanted to get some clarification regarding the Aleutian geese matter. I have heard from longtime residents that the Aleutian geese basically made their home in Del Norte County and that they were chased out, and that is how they basically found a second home and reestablished themselves in Humboldt County. So could we please have some clarification on that for the record as to how this initially started and who was involved and why, because I understand that there's a history there, and I haven't heard that mentioned yet this evening. Thank you.
I don't know how many Aleutian geese there were at one point, but they were a problem. They were a problem, and what happened was, and I don't know what year this could have been, but there were foxes introduced up on the islands on the Aleutian chain, and it fundamentally wiped out the Aleutian goose population up there. And in the early 70s, I think I'm right, Helen, and I'm talking early
Yeah. 75,
there was a population
78.
study that was probably maybe a grand total of 400 to 600 that came here in this county. And they were, of course, on the endangered species list. And over a period of time, because of proper feeding, I think is the way to say it, and removal of the fox in Alaska on the Aleutian Islands, the population increased, and they had a population goal of 60,000 for the Aleutian goose to be, maybe that was the number that they wanted to have to be removed off the endangered species list, because it's been advertised as a wondrous recovery of a species. And now the population is about 250,000, and the state doesn't feed them. The state doesn't feed them. The private landowners are what's feeding them, and what has pushed the population or allowed the population to go to a point of no return, really. I mean, it's a serious issue for anybody who has a field of grass in that time frame when they're migrating from north to south and from south back north again, because they can devastate a field of grass fast with those kinds of numbers. They don't come here anymore because they were hazed up here because the state would not do anything about them, would not contribute a thing, and so they got hazed to try to save the forage up here for the cattle, et cetera, and they decided to quit coming here, and they've moved into Ferndale Bottoms, basically, Arcata Bottoms, basically. And hey, there's 4,000 acres here, and there's 15,000, 18,000, maybe 20,000 acres of potential grassland availability down there. And so it's become, that's really the reason that the population went from, let's say, because at one point here there were 100,000, and they left because of hazing, et cetera, because groceries were better down south. That's why they went south, basically. Because they were here for a long time with a lot of effort put to try to salvage the grass for the cattle.
Well, the state actually did help for a while, until the park came in and closed that off.
Well, there was a lot of land, there was some land, is a better way to say it, in Del Norte County that was at one point managed for goose habitat, and that stopped. And so the state quit allowing that acreage that they owned to be managed for goose habitat.
Well,
And
what was the other areas that were managed too? Like along the Lower Lake Road, the Blanca Ranch,
Yeah.
all of that. They lost their grazing permits, they said.
sure, that was state properties, basically. Fish and game or whatever, yes. Yeah, all that property was stopped. Same way in Humboldt County. There was a whole series of leases that Fish and Game had on Fish and Game property down there, and those leases got stopped, and that property, which Jeff mentioned, was not available for a goose for a 3 or 4 or 5 years. Now it's becoming available again because of management. This land has to get managed for goose habitat because they don't like canary grass. They like short grass. And the land has to be managed properly for goose habitat and for cattle habitat.
name's Steve Apple. I worked on the original Goose Hazen project out at Alexander Dairy, and when there were thick as beehives out there. And I've seen the damage they can do firsthand. They line out 500 deep and 500 wide,
Yep.
and they mow the field right down to nothing, to mud. Anyways, once they open the hunting season, now the first 5 or 6 shots go off and they head right down to Humboldt. Most of them just bug out right away. I've watched them. The guys go out there, a few shots go off, and you see them all group up, and they head over the mountain, and there they go. Anyway, that's all I had to say.
I'd like to say something. First of all, we all felt the wrath of the geese in Del Norte County. And as these guys back here said, there was, I don't know, it was like 300-400, maybe a little bit more acreage at the end of Pala that the state parks had that they let be managed for the geese. And Blake even set up an irrigation system there, and it was managed very well. And one of the last Aleutian goose working groups that we had here, a representative from the state parks came in and said that is going to end. This is going to be the last that we can do that. But the thing that troubles me for this whole look of this on a general scale is that down in Humboldt County, the Humboldt Refuge has 5,000 acres. And so we would say, oh, wow, that sounds really good for the geese to be able to go there. I had a nice chat with the managers down there today, and they have 340 acres, they said, that's actually in the hunt area, and it's not necessarily goose habitat. They said they have 250 acres out of the 5,000 acres that's actually pasture land that no hunting is on, that the geese can go there. And then you've heard kind of, as you can project, the numbers of acreage down there and so forth compared to here. For example, in Humboldt County, and this counts the hill cattle, there's 71,000 head of cattle in Humboldt County. And in Del Norte County, there's 9,200. I just got those from the Farm Extension Office down there today. That was the 2021 report. So my point is that there is a lot more area down in Humboldt. And the thing is that it just totally devastated everything like what Steve just said up here. I mean, you know, it just turned into mud flats. And I feel bad for anyone that's having to experience that in Humboldt County. As they said, and I also talked to Todd, what was his last name? Hansen, I think his name was, with the Aleutian Geese project. The bottom line is that we need food for the geese. We have brought them back to a number that our areas just absolutely cannot support. Even if the geese turned around and came up here with the numbers that we have now, there's not enough food for them up here either. But we're going to be back to another mud hole, just like what we were before. And unfortunately, what those folks down there are experiencing. I was really sad to see that the Aleutian Goose Management Plan, the last time it was updated was in 2006. And so the agencies have not done anything to try and manage this species until we are at a crisis point. And what Rob said is really true. When we were experiencing the problem up here, we reached out to Humboldt County, and it's like I said, the old American way is that if it's not affecting me, I'm not interested. But now the problem, they are seeing what we experienced up here nearly 20 years ago. And so the hunting, to me, is trivial. What we need to do is have our legislative people work with the agencies, and they are going to have to be responsible for providing food for a species that they brought back to 5 times what the target area was. And according to Todd, he said that in the last few years that there's no documentation at all as far as population increases. And he said that in a very honest way. But common sense tells you something's wrong with that. We cannot have 250,000 birds going up to hatch off and say that there's not any kind of a population increase. And even if we do have more days for hunting, you may know, Jeff, what the bag limit is, but I was told by him that the average hunt is 2 birds, and I think it's like 10 or 12 birds, the limit, but they're only getting 2 is the average on the hunts. And so, I mean, that's like a drop in the ocean. So the hunting itself is not going to solve it for Humboldt and or Del Norte. It has to be the management by the agencies that we have to do. And I've worked with these agencies for 30 years, and that's not an overnight solution. But they have created the mess. They are responsible. We have to get the legislature's people behind it to do something. It's not fair to the birds either. Like the guy at the refuge today, he said, well, when they haze them or when they hunt them, they just don't go up in the air. And we said, yeah, they just don't evaporate. They go somewhere else. And so that is what we need solved. The hunting, I don't want to see the hazing and additional hunting pressure force these birds back up here, because according for all the years that I work with Paul Springer, the guru of the Aleutian geese, they said one of the triggers that has these birds go back to the islands is the conditioning on the birds. And if they aren't have enough body condition, they don't leave. So if they are prematurely pushed off either hazing or additional hunting, I don't want to see them stop here in Del Norte for a snack along the way, because they're going to be here and then we're going to have the same problem. And so I think we need to have a united front from Humboldt and Del Norte, and we have to have the agencies held accountable. And with the lake level up here, when the lake is at the 4-foot mean sea level, the historic level, that was about 2,000 acres. And when it's up to 8, 9, 10 feet, it's up to 6,000 acres. And so all of the dairies and ranches that were around the lake that provided the historical habitat for any of the geese, and they were nowhere near that number. The highest back, like Jim McLaughlin and them can remember, was 2,500 birds that was here. So actually, their habitat has been destroyed. And personally, we went through a 10-year inverse condemnation suit, and one of the conditions in the court case at that time, like Rob said, it was an endangered species. One of the things in the court case was that they had to have our ranch for the Aleutian geese. And if you go there now, it's about 8 or 10 feet full of tules, full mud flats. All the area that the geese were using in the late 70s and 80s has been destroyed. And the agencies have done that because of their management. And that has a lot to do with what these guys are talking about on the hunting and stuff like that. A lot of that has changed because the management has changed. So we have to get them some way, and it's not easy. Like I said, I've been doing it for 30 years. They have to come to the table and be held accountable for what they've created. I'm off my soapbox.
That doesn't solve our problem, however.
No, it doesn't. But hunting is not.
Anybody else have some discussion about geese?
I have a couple questions for Jeff, and maybe Mr. Rice as well. Are there any projections in this work group or through your guys' association that any projections if we move these hunting seasons, how many birds could be taken, or is there any projection in this at all?
Not according to Todd.
So Melanie Weaver, who's the state wildlife biologist, is of the opinion that, and I don't want to misspeak for Melanie, but so Jack, please step in and herd me if I'm going down the wrong path here, because it's been a few months. But Melanie Weaver essentially described to the group that hunting is the only tool we have to try to control the population. And one of the ideas is to try to increase hunter success rates. One way of doing that is to hunt the geese when they actually exist in the 2 counties. Because instead we're burning our 107 days in the month of, the second half of December all the way to, what do you want to call it, February something. There's no geese here. So why would we be burning our 107 days during that period? So that was one thing that was brought up, which is why we kind of got to, okay, let's hunt the things while they exist here. The other question that we had for Melanie, just why it's on my mind, because it's not one you asked, Mike, but was that if we started hunting these things in the fall, and Helen, I think you talked to Melanie too, didn't you?
What's that?
Did you talk to Melanie Weaver?
We just
email
emailed.
exchange?
Yeah, it was mainly Todd I talked to.
Oh, gotcha. But there was a question about if we start pushing a lot of pressure on these things in the fall, whether they'd come back to Del Norte County and wreak havoc. And it was a pretty resounding no, because, what is your name, sir? I'm sorry. Steve Avalo said, it's pretty similar in Humboldt County. When every field has a hunter and they start getting shot at, you see, I live in Fortuna, and you can look up the first week of season, and it is just by the thousands. They're headed to the Central Valley, and we don't see them again. So that's kind of why we wanted to get the whole shift in the fall. There's also questions and concerns, and I think they're legitimate, of Del Norte County producers and what happens if we start hunting them in the spring. As soon as they hit Humboldt County, will they stick around? Will they come north? And that, I think, is more of an honest shoulder shrug that nobody knows. So in terms of population projections, the population, and this, I think, is Todd, who gave this report. The population essentially, statistically, is not changing, but that's because the error bars are so stinking large. So every year, the population seems to be plateauing and growing consistently, but statistically, it's not changing because it's 250,000 plus or minus 50,000, kind of like my irrigated acre estimates, right? One thing that I will mention, though, just to clarify, is when I gave the random irrigation estimates to you, that was in fall, was what I was telling you. So that's irrigated acres of where the geese want to be. In the spring, you could double that number roughly to capture the whole area that the geese use in Humboldt County. So I honestly don't know. I kind of am of the opinion as a hunter, because for those of you that don't know, I wear 2 hats. I have the university hat, and then I also run a goose guiding business. So I spend a lot of time in the mud chasing these little buggers. And as a hunter, when we put too much pressure on them in Humboldt County, they start landing, and this is in the spring, not in the fall, but they start landing on the hill ground, where you, as a hunter, you can't even get to the little stinking things. Like they start using ground that makes no sense, that is not their traditional habitat type. They just go to good grass wherever they can find it, and there's no shortage of it down there. So I think that the land mass is small enough here, and that there's enough hunters here that you all could put more pressure on them on your smaller acreage than we ever could down south to force them north, because there's not enough people down there. So that's my guess, and my honest, I have no stinking clue.
One more question for you. In Humboldt County, is there any proposed new habitat by state or federal ground?
No. The only thing that we're pushing politically on very aggressively as a group, and this is mostly the Cattlemen's Association, is trying to get those state grounds up to snuff like Rob was talking about. And the ball is rolling, it's going in the right direction, but to see the species shifts that all the ranchers in the room know, once you have that canary grass and those unpalatable species, you're looking at years of well-managed ground with aggressive cattle grazing before you're going to see the species shift back to anything a goose would be interested in eating. So even when it gets to be short grass, we still have 3 years at the minimum of getting it back to where there's going to be anything there a goose has any interest in eating. They'll use it as a refuge. They'll go park there, but eventually they'll get hungry and have to jump over the fence and eat the neighbor's grass.
Is your proposals to the state, would that include the leases that, like what Rob was talking about earlier, so that the cattle would have other places? I mean, is that going to be like a leased managed ground, or is it?
Run that by me again, I'm not
So
picking it up.
you said you have the ball rolling to increase some habitat. Would that habitat be leased land that farmers would be using?
Correct, yeah. Yeah, local ranchers can put in bids to lease the properties. And the way it's set up is kind of a hassle, because the leases, in my opinion, and this is the lawyers taking over stuff in Sacramento, but one of the challenges with the leases is that they don't have a long enough lease agreement to encourage the lessee to invest into the property, because in 2 years when it's up for rent again and you just dumped $100,000 into it, you kind of want to be there for more than 2 years, and then all of a sudden someone else puts a bid in and outbids you, and you don't ever see a return on investment. So that's one of the problems with the properties, like Blake setting up the irrigation on the parks ground.
Yes.
Like, that's a huge investment, and now that irrigation is just all rotted away or pulled out. I have no idea what happened to it, but that's the dangerous part as being a producer running on public ground, is it's hard to invest in it because you don't know how long you're going to have it.
Those are 5-year leases, aren't they?
Yeah.
I
think
know
so.
that.
They are.
I think so. Yeah, I mean, we were heavily involved with when that all went away because of the state lawyer decided the leases that were being managed locally weren't acceptable. And so every lease on fish and game property in the entire state of California was all revoked.
That was with
Every lease.
That was with when the RCDs were running them, yeah?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, there were leases down in the valley that were upwards of $1 million apiece.
Yeah.
That all got stopped. And it all went through review for a couple of years until they came up with the right terminology on the lease by the lawyers. And now it's beginning to come back through. I mean, Helen, I think, aren't you leasing some of that property?
Yeah, and basically, it kind of needs to be along the line of what he just said. The cattle go in and they can only eat so much because of the rankness of a lot of the vegetation. And so it's not included in the leases, and probably be something we should look at. Either the rancher can work some of it off by mowing, but it's going to take time. It's not going to happen overnight. And but even how many potential acres down in Humboldt County?
It's not much.
Ballpark figure, under 1,000?
Yeah, under 1,000, more than 500, under 1,000.
Yeah, and it's probably not more than 500, probably more like 350 or something here. So, so say between the two counties, there's 1,000 acres of potential manageable land for the geese. And what I tried to point out on the number of head of cattle in Humboldt County, and this, like I said, it wasn't broke down to the valleys, but it was like 71,000 versus 9,000 up here. That goes to show you how much more land is down there. If you figured out the carry capacity of each acre and everything. But we do have to look at that when we do present what the geese are doing, because they said that every 10 to 12 geese eats as much each day as a 1,200-pound cow. That was Paul Springer's back in the day that he came up with. So that gives you an idea of how many geese cattle's running around.
Mike, did we get your questions answered? I feel like I failed, but I can't even remember what the first ones were.
Hey, can I make a big comment?
I was just really kind of interested to see if the, along with what Helen was saying, if the state or federal government plan on feeding any of these geese, and it doesn't seem that they're real workable to do so.
No, not this.
Was there a question from, or a statement from Mr. Rice there that we missed?
Really briefly, a lot of the other issues, so the Aleutian Goose Working Group, again, I'm just sort of facilitating this discussion. It intends to grapple with many of the points that you made, that trying to understand about utilizing state and federal resources to feed the geese, whatever that is if that's land or however you accommodate that. The issues of how you can improve hunter success. Those are all parts that the Aleutian Goose Working Group wants to move forward with those discussions. The date of the Aleutian Goose last management plan. This letter that was being drafted was really the starting point, and I'll look to Jeff to help me out here, but my recollection is the main goal was to move it up and start the season earlier in October, and that middle part was sort of whatever came out of it. The main goal was to start that in October. So this is just one small piece of what the Aleutian Goose Working Group wants to do, and all the things you all have identified hopefully will be key parts of future discussions.
Just as an information item, 250,000 geese is equal at 12 geese per head per cow. That's 21,000 cows equivalent. So I guess in Humboldt County there aren't 70,000 cows. There's 90,000 cows.
That's right.
Yeah, and thank you for adding that, Jack. And then the other thing that hasn't been mentioned, that I think is in the letter from the Aleutian Goose Working Group, is that Mark Henley and I, so Mark Henley works with California Waterfowl Association, and he does state policy work, and he and I both are fairly strongly opinionated that no matter what we do, these geese are going to keep changing as fast as we can change. Mm-hmm. And that we want to maximize hunter opportunity, maximize basically the free hazing that hunters provide to landowners, and try to kill as many geese as possible. So one thing that he and I have also fully committed to with this change is at the end of each hunting season, we're hoping to survey, and again, I'm sure we'll miss folks like we did during this initial effort, but we're hoping to survey waterfowl hunters and landowners in the 2 counties. So to use the University of California Cooperative Extension email list of landowners in bottomlands and send it'll probably be an electronic survey to those folks to try to get input on how they would like to see the seasons move in the future, and then do the same thing for the hunters. Because there's some concern also that, and this was talked about a lot at the Humboldt County Fish and Game Commission, because we have no landowners on our commission, it's only hunters. And one of the big concerns they had was losing hunt days on public property for game birds, essentially. So because in the late season, for those of you that don't know, you're not allowed to hunt on public ground traditionally. You're only allowed to hunt on private ground with an effort to force those geese back to public ground and relieve grazing pressures on the livestock industry. So that was one thing that was discussed a lot in our group, and what I, as a hunter, I guess, look at is that we're gaining hunting days when there's no duck season. So as a waterfowl guru and crazy junkie like I am, I get now, instead of 107 days, I get, a month before the 107 days starts for the ducks, where I get to chase geese, and then I get a month and a half after the 107 days closes for the ducks, where I get to chase geese. So I just increased my total waterfowl hunting days by 70 days as a waterfowl junkie. And when the goose season's closed and there's no geese here, I can still go do my duck hunting on any public ground I want to. So that was something that the Fish and Game Commission talked a lot about down south. And at the end of the day, I don't think that the public has lost opportunities. I think the public has gained opportunities in terms of hunt days on public land. So that is kind of a real aside, but something that I think is important to point out as a commission that's supposed to represent the hunters and all other wildlife enthusiasts.
When did the first geese arrive in Humboldt County this year, in the fall?
It was the first, actually, I think I have a text message. I can go try to look it up, but it was the first couple days of October. I don't think we had hardly any in September, but I think we had the whole population by October 15th or so was the most I saw. Yeah.
The whole population, but not quite.
Yeah.
There were plenty in town here in the middle
Yeah. And I'm sure they were
September
north of it.
28th.
What was that?
September 28th, Jeff.
Oh, that's when I sent you that text?
Correct.
Yeah, September 28th was the first video I got on an irrigated pasture that had 10,000 geese or so standing on it, looking at the guy sideways like this as he walked up to him.
From a personal viewpoint, I would rather see it so that you could start hunting them immediately when they started to arrive, to encourage them to go south and to kill some for the population. But I'm not so sure, because we don't know yet, and no one really has an professional opinion, shall we say, whether we will start to have those geese come up here, leave down there, then stay here and do the same thing here. I'm talking about in the springtime.
In the spring, yeah.
So I would rather see more, even if it's another 10 days in the fall, so you can start right away. I mean, maybe that's kind of selfish as far as Humboldt and Del Norte,
Right.
because it's going south, but I mean, it is what it is. I mean, you guys don't want them there, we don't want them here.
And honestly, personally, again, taking my University of California hat on, putting my guide hat on, I would love to have it go till Christmas. Because I kill a lot of dang geese the first 2 weeks of December, 3 weeks of December.
But I mean,
There's a
maybe-
lot of geese down there still. in
But if
Humboldt
you
County.
started it in September,
Can you start hunting them before October 7, or is that the absolute earliest allowable?
No,
Nope, September 1st to March 10th.
yeah.
Okay, so you could start, as an example, quote unquote, the 28th of September or whenever
Yeah.
that time frame is.
Yeah.
And increase the amount of early season southbound goose hunting days, and potentially decrease, as Helen is alluding to, the total number of quote unquote northbound hunting
Yeah.
days.
Yeah, and I don't want to speak for the Aleutian Goose Working Group or anyone else, but I think that would be pretty agreeable, and to me it seems like a pretty decent compromise. Because for us, that fall feed is really, really important going into winter when the forage isn't growing. And in the spring, even the non-irrigated stuff is growing, so it's the guys in the fall that I feel the most for, because they're stockpiling feed, high quality feed to go into winter, and then that feed just gets wiped out.
I missed which option, Humboldt County.
Two.
Option 2.
So first Saturday in October, option 2 is the one that the working group decided that they liked as a group.
Why didn't they pick 3? If you're seeing more geese,
I
and
voted
if-
for number 3.
I mean, from your explanation, I mean, it seems like option 3 would be a better, and adding another 10 days on the front of that.
Yeah, so
So it'd be like 80 days in the regular and 27 in the late.
correct, yeah. And Jack, you were leading that conversation, and I was struggling in the car on a cell phone on Zoom in bad service. So do you want to take that on? Because I have a recollection of it, but you were the actual person taking the notes.
Well, you might have a more accurate recollection. I'll tell you what, what I recall is that you had a bunch of people, all with anecdotal experience, that, what they saw, what they observed about when geese show up and leave, and some of them want to see. It seemed like everybody had a particular perspective. Where we ended up was kind of like what everybody could agree on, or what I should say nobody really strongly disagreed with. So it's something of the result of a committee as to why you got there, meaning there's as many different perspectives as there were people there. Jeff's only one person of all those that were on the call, so he could only give really his perspective, not like what everybody was thinking, if that makes sense.
And that was the same thing that we had at the Humboldt County Fish and Game Commission, is everyone had different opinions. About half the group actually in that group wanted to open it on the third Saturday in October, and the other half of the group wanted it on the first Saturday in October. So we were so far disparate that eventually I just threw my arms in the air, like I said, and just said, hey, let's just write a letter that says we support moving it forward, because that group wasn't able to come to a consensus on anything.
Hey, Jeff, if I could interject one quick perspective. So I think the main thing for those that were on the call was starting the first Saturday in October seemed to be where hunters and landowners were good. If there was another perspective important to Del Norte regarding what happened in between the regular and the extended season, that would be great to have and understand. And then, you know, the letter isn't final. I don't know where that is in the process, but understanding your perspective in that space would be great. I think Helen identified her viewpoint.
Yeah, and that letter that we wrote has not been sent yet. So it'd be pretty easy for us to host another Zoom meeting, add the Del Norte perspective, tweak the letter, and then everyone's sending the same letter to Melanie Weaver, and she doesn't have to think about what's best for everybody. It's already been decided.
Yeah, a little bit of the information that I've gathered from the discussion, like October 1st to December 15th in the beginning of the season, and then February 20 to March 10, that's basically, approximately speaking, the 107 days. So it adds a significant amount of time in the beginning and cuts a little bit of time at the end when they're moving north. And so I think that Wednesday we have an RCD meeting, and we're going to discuss it with all the landowners here in Del Norte County. And I would assume that they're going to be concerned about forage, since they're all cattle producers of some sort. And so obviously we have to have something, and so trying to reduce the potential for when they're moving forward to come here, I think is beneficial from our standpoint up here.
You said February 1st, Rob?
Yeah, I wrote down October 1 to December 15, based on the 28th of September, your discussion there. That was one of the dates in option 3, December 15, and then February 20 to March 10 is approximately speaking a 30-day late season. Reduces a little bit of the late season dating. Potentially maybe less potential for kicking more geese north earlier.
Hey, could I ask a quick question? Then your allocation, another way to describe it is basically it's a 77-day and then 30 days before March 10th. That's how you're breaking it up. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's roughly what I've got there. I can't add, I had 76 and 30, but hey, it could be 77 because I guess it is 107 days, huh?
I was going off the total amount. Yep, that works fine. What we found out is the weird thing is the late season, you just pick a number of days and go backwards from March 10th. The regular season, you have to pick a descriptive term. The first Saturday in October, the last Saturday in September. So it's different. The actual dates are different because you apparently they don't want to start on like a Tuesday. So that's where you end up with some weird calculations. However, the late season always, you just go backwards from March 10th. I was looking for a way to describe that to Melanie. Would you be speculating on the last Saturday in September or the first Saturday in October, which obviously changes every year?
Well, this year, the first Saturday in October was funny, October 1st. That's how I picked it, not for any other reason.
Okay, got it.
So, Jack, you can also just pick the first day of October for 77 days. And then that would be the same every year in the fall. The reason it gets funky in the spring is because of February 29th.
Right.
So that's why it has to go, you pick the 10th and then go back X number of days. And it wiggles around by a day every few years. But you can pick the first day of a month.
You guys wanted it to start on a Saturday, though. if you don't care, then yeah, you can just pick a day, sure.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm
know.
assuming for a hunter, Saturday would be better.
Yeah, I would assume the hunting community would like that, but
Yes, we would.
yeah, but
Quick comment, if you don't mind.
yeah, go for it. But I will say, just it hasn't traditionally opened on Saturdays either, so that would not be new, because it always opens in the middle of the week currently. Duck season, yes. Aleutian goose season is almost always a random day in the middle of the week since I've been here. So.
Which makes no sense either.
No.
Before you talk, Jeff, I'd like to correct something. I had a senior moment. When he did the math there, it's 30 to 32 geese eats as much as 1,200-pound cow, not the 10 to 12. They would have to be awfully big geese to do that.
My name's Jeff Reed. I didn't introduce myself earlier, and I apologize for that. Real briefly on the potential schedule, I'm all in on opening it the first Saturday in October and let it run till it runs out, and let the birds end up where they go. At the end of the day, a few of us will kill a few, a lot more will get away. And if we can hurry them further south sooner, I think that's probably a good thing for Del Norte County. Not to go too far back in time, but roughly 35 or so years ago, when the management plan for the wildlife area first came out, two of the top 5 goals for the management area, one was Aleutian goose habitat, the other one for canvasback resting areas during the entire winter season. And I would be remiss not to remind the department that was one of the top 5 goals for purchasing that wildlife area and managing the damn thing. And I don't need to beat the dead horse that they've done none of that, but I would take this opportunity to remind them of that's one reason that property was purchased 40 years ago. And they've let what Aleutian goose habitat there was out there all go to hell in those 40 years, and they've done absolutely nothing to sustain it, much less enhance it. And they're managing it for some other purposes, none of which are related to waterfowl. And with that, I'll be quiet, and thank you for your time. Till a bit. I'm talking about all of it. Don't even get me started on the palace, Steve. It'll be a bad night real quick.
And just a note, the Lake Earl land management plan is now under review, and it would be an opportune time to talk to them about this. I don't know that it would do any good, because I think it's already internally kind of making its way towards getting approved. But right now, it is being looked at, so now would be the time for us to say something.
Anybody else have any words of wisdom about goose season? Do we as a commission want to discuss any more specific dating, or do you think we just kind of leave it alone at this point for Jack and for Jeff to take back south?
You mean to talk about like what you said? Is that what you mean about taking it back south?
They're going to go back to the working group in Humboldt County.
That's what I meant.
And then come up with a letter, and then they're going to, of course, ask for folks to endorse the letter. One would assume that would be us, that would be Farm Bureau, that would be RCD, landowners, etc. up here, if we have anything specific. And hey, there could be some changes and alterations based upon landowners, because you have 2 landowners present, but the landowners are going to be present on Wednesday at the RCD meeting, and there'll be more discussion from the landowner standpoint then, I'm sure. And maybe they have different view, maybe they don't. I don't know.
Okay, I just have a few points of clarification for this group, because I heard 2 different things and I wrote them both down. Okay, so one was the first, October 1st for 77 days, which would essentially be October 1st to December 15th every year. And then that would give you your 30 days in the spring going back from March 10th. The other option which Jeff just mentioned and also seemed to get support for, was kind of the option 3 of the first Saturday in October, which would be October 7th to, I guess that would be actually December 22nd for 77 days, and then the same 30 days in the late season. So the only point of clarification I'm asking from this group is, do we want it to open on the first Saturday or the 1st of October? Because it sounded like there was consensus about the 77 days in the fall.
Which one would be better for realizing the goals that you're setting to do this?
I heard that there's geese available in Humboldt County in relatively sizable numbers the 28th day of September. And so, in theory, if you open it October 1st, there's geese there to hunt, to haze, to whatever. And then, you know, and I must have misunderstood what you said, Jeff, because you said to start on the 1st of October and just run the full 107 days, or are you still advocating a split season?
I would not argue against a split season necessarily, just for the illusion, but to me, whether it starts on the 28th of September, the 2nd of October, or the 5th of October doesn't make a damn bit of difference.
Yeah.
It's whatever, just pick a number and agree on it. I hate to
Right.
simplify it as that, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's what it comes down to.
I mean, I think when I think the landowners, like Helen and so forth, I think they're right. I mean, there is concern that on the fly south, it's not a huge issue necessarily. When they turn around and fly north, if Humboldt County decides to do a massive hazing job, the chances are we're in trouble. Or we're back, or we're back where we were. So I think the 1st of October for a certain period of time, 15th of December, and then 30 days before the 10th of March is reasonable alternative.
So I have a proposal to the group, potentially. What if, so the first Saturday in October could be no later than October 7th, obviously, if it's the first one, right? So the option 3 that Melanie Weaver sent us couldn't be later than October 7th on any given year. It obviously could be October 1st, but then that affords people that have to work on weekdays and kids, I'm thinking specifically about kids getting out hunting on opening day. If we could give them the Saturday, that may increase participation in the opening day of goose season, since we know, at least we're hopeful, that they move south rapidly. So maybe that gets more hunters on the ground. It could be somewhere between the 1st and the 7th of October, but then it opens on a Saturday, and it's the first Saturday every year. Everybody knows what day the thing's opening. And then have it run for, instead of 70 days, 77 days. So that would take us into December 22nd. Again, that would be at the earliest. And then we would go, the late season would get truncated by a week and would be only 30 days, roughly February 10th-ish through March 7th. Did that make sense? Okay, okay.
Real quick, Jeff, before you step down, when is this, if it's all agreed upon, going to be proposed to the State Fish and Game Commission, and when do these seasons have to be set by law?
Yeah, so that is a good point, and thank you, Mike, because we're supposed to have these letters in essentially last week. So, Jack, you're better with processes than I, but would it make sense for this group to propose what I just explained, which is a modified option 3 from the first Saturday in October for 77 days, and then February 10th to March 10th, to the Fish and Game as a letter from the Del Norte County Board of Supervisors, and then you and I go back to the Aleutian Goose Working Group, explain what was requested by this group, and look for consensus, and hopefully they just give a head nod and we move forward? Does that make sense, or do you have another suggestion?
No, from a process perspective, that would be the best as far as us trying to have something to Melanie as quickly as possible, given that we're already late. So if this group could make a recommendation to say, these are the dates that we think the Board of Supervisors should request or support from the commission, then that would let us draft, make the change to the letter, assume everybody with the Aleutian Goose Working Group's good with it, then we can do that work and try to get it done before otherwise we have to wait until a couple of months probably by the time we go through both processes again. Am I right there?
Yeah, we'd have to wait until this time next year, essentially. According to Melanie, I think.
So I know for a fact that it takes a minimum of 120 days at the Office of Administrative Law for this to go in after the commission has made their decision. So wherever that law is, whatever that date that the law states that the seasons have to be set by this date, action has to happen at a minimum of 120 days prior to that.
Before. Okay.
Well, and I think isn't that their March or February or March meeting? That's why the rush. This has to get on that meeting for them.
Yeah, and you won't get a letter from the Board of Supervisors till sometime in January at the absolute earliest. And I don't know whether they have one.
Them to have a special meeting?
They have one more meeting, I
so
think, in
we could
December,
ask them to have a
and they're
special
done
meeting
for the
too.
year.
But we could get this ball in motion with the Board of Supervisors, and then we could get letters from the RCD and the Farm Bureau if those groups agreed to it.
I'm not sure we need a letter from the Donald County Board of Supervisors, do we?
I don't know.
Jack?
According to Melanie, she said they did, but I don't know.
You guys can write your own letter. You don't have to go through the board.
Oh,
You guys just write your own letter.
Oh, okay, great.
We don't have to have the Board of Supervisors write a letter.
Right.
But we do need somebody to write the letter.
Go ahead, Rob. You need my pen.
Yeah.
You could ask them to just send it in as a supplemental comment, even if it doesn't meet the deadline. At least it shows support from the county supervisor. That's what they did for me last month regarding the petition ban. They passed it in one day and sent them a letter.
So what I suppose we need to do as a group is to vote to potentially write a letter, and then I guess it's different than the RCD or the Farm Bureau in a letter. It's a totally different organization in essence, and therefore we don't have to wait for them, and they don't have to wait for us.
Correct, yeah.
With that said, I'd make a motion to write a letter to change the Aleutian goose hunting season to the first Saturday in October and to run consecutive 77 days with a closure and dating back from March 10th, 30 days for the season.
Is there a second for that motion?
I second.
Job second. I suppose, Jackie, you have to call for a vote, or do I have to call for a vote?
Say
Oh,
consecutive days.
all in favor of that motion that Mike made? Say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Now, the meets the road. Who's going to write the letter?
The assistant chair.
I think it could be pretty simple, simpler than this, and, yeah, I'll circulate it to make sure I got the right days, and I'll do that pretty quick, in the next couple days.
I have a copy of a letter, sorry when I say it quite this way. I have a copy of a letter that we sent to Melanie from the Donald County Farm Bureau opposing the change back in 2019, and it wasn't very long. So it doesn't have to be very long.
Yeah.
The Aleutian Goose Working Group's happy to modify whatever, give you the letter that we wrote in Word, and you can change it however you want, because hopefully everybody will have the same dates, so it should be straightforward.
Do you have those Word docs I sent you to share?
Yeah, well, Rob, or you can just send it to me again.
I'll send it to you tomorrow, and then you can steal any of that verbiage you like out of it.
So we'll write a letter, and I guess we'll forward that letter to Melanie. Would that be the right person to address it to?
Yes, that's my understanding. Jack,
And copy the working group?
that would be great.
We were directed to send it to the commission and copy Melanie.
Yeah,
on-
there you go.
yeah.
Fish and Game Commission with a copy to Melanie and a copy to the working group. And hopefully when the working group has additional meetings, I know the Farm Bureau got a notification of a working group meeting, but you know, it's like when we had the meetings pretty much up here because we were the only folks kind of involved in it. Nobody from Humboldt County came, and the same kind of a problem is in when Humboldt County has them down there, nobody from here goes south. It's not quite so easy to attend those meetings. Maybe we would meet in Oric, but there's no restaurant there anymore.
But we have modern technology now.
But maybe we can Zoom one.
Yeah, all of the working group meetings, we do set up Zoom for folks that are jumping in.
Wonderful. Phew. Are we done with the goose discussion?
The goose is cooked.
I just really sincerely want to thank everybody for taking the time to have this discussion and help move this ball down the road. And I, again, apologize if we missed folks, which I know we did in the beginning, and we will continue to do. So if you're in the community and come across anybody that you think would be interested to be on there, especially from the sportsman world, please send them my way, and we'll try to get them included. Because I think that the hunting group specifically is underrepresented on that Aleutian Goose working group right now. So I would like to get some representation from Humboldt and Del Norte County from the sporting folks. So thank you all for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for coming all the way up from Humboldt. Okay, so we'll continue on with our agenda, and maybe what we need to do, it's a good thing to do, is to move Jeff up front a little bit here on Lake Earl closures, so he doesn't have to, maybe he's going to stay and wait the whole season, the whole time, but maybe you want to discuss anything you might have to do on the closure at the lake.
Sure. Thank you for that. Again, I'm Jeff Reed. I'm here on behalf of myself and the Del Norte waterfowlers. It's been a while since you've all met as a large group, and I appreciate the fact that almost everybody's here. Maybe everybody is here. I've lost track. But anyhow, I briefly mentioned this a while ago. I went to the Board of Supervisors, I don't know, mid-November, somewhere in that time frame, when we got wind of a petition to close Lake Earl to all waterfowl hunting forever. And the day I went to the supervisors meeting, they voted to write a letter in opposition to that petition and send it to the State Fish and Game Commission. And the county wrote a well-written document, a two-pager, explaining to the Fish and Game Commission that the county didn't appreciate being ignored. The county doesn't appreciate the potential closure of hunting of the Lake Earl Wildlife Area, and a few other items that were thrown in there. Along with the county letter, the Del Norte waterfowlers sent a two-pager to the Fish and Game Commission regarding opposition to the closures as well. And our intent is to speak with them via Zoom or a telephone on Wednesday or Thursday when they actually consider that petition to close the lake to hunting. I would have liked to come to y'all last month and tell you about all this and get some support, but that didn't happen, but that's okay. the Board of Supervisors, in my opinion, did their job and they got on it pretty quick. So it just takes getting their attention sometimes, and that, it worked. Any questions on that?
Who wrote the petition?
Pardon me?
Who wrote the petition?
A fellow that lives at the end of Lakeview, and he got
South.
240,000 signatures, roughly 90-some thousand from California residents. It's on the web, so anybody could say anything. And my sources at CWA and a few other places tell me the petition's a non-starter. But our little group decided a month or two ago that we're not going to wait, because we all remember the hunting mountain lion ban, I don't know, 30 years ago, maybe more. My memory's kind of foggy, but that all started with the petition down in San Diego. So, and you know all this stuff, Mike. So if you sit around and do nothing, then bad things happen, long story short. So we're hopeful about it all, but we're still going to stay engaged with them. On a more relevant note, I don't know if you all know that roughly now almost 70 acres of the south end of Lake Tolowa was closed for hunting for 18 days in November, and it's currently open, but it's going to be closed down for 22 days? 22 days or so in January, which is basically the last month of the season. And our group's gone round and round with the Eureka office multiple times by multiple people, and we've always got the same response. At the October meeting in Smith River, we gave them 273 comment forms in opposition to the closures, and they really didn't care, and it was pretty obvious. But we did have an issue with them about a week after the November closure ended, when the closure signs were still up on the lake. There was about a dozen of them out there that state close to hunting beyond this sign. And after a couple of letters, they finally decided they maybe ought to take the signs down or cover them up, one or the two. And they begrudgingly did that. They took them down. They cut the posts off that the pipe were on. Not my problem. Most of them are underwater now, the posts are. So anyway, my guess is those signs will come back January 2nd when the closure gets reinstituted. And right now, just between us and we're probably going to go to the Fish and Game Commission about these closures, because we've had enough. We're tired of being ignored and hearing the same mumbo jumbo. Pardon me?
How many days did they actually work this year?
We're withholding that information until we take it to the Fish and Game Commission. But I can tell you, I can count on this many fingers how many days they worked during the 18 days of closure. And it's almost as many as they worked all year last year. So anyway, we're ever hopeful and we're stubborn. So with that, I'll say thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Persistence, that's what it takes, unfortunately. Thanks, Jeff. We'll go ahead and back to the stuff. Is there any information to add on state or federal public lands?
Thank you. Like, when's Fish and Game gonna get rid of all the Scotch broom out there off the Lake Earl? I mean, it's a wonderful forest now.
I drove by the other day, sorry, Helen, and I see one white calf out there, and the rest of them were totally and completely invisible, and it'd be awful hard to round them up, and you could never count them.
I couldn't find them for 45 minutes one day, and it's 30 acres.
Oh my God. Is that piece next to you? You mean?
Yeah, that's part of the lease thing. And see, that, 3 years ago, Fish and Game clipped that because the neighbor complained next door, and you look at the neighbors next door, and then you look at that. Goes to show you.
So it's the Jeff guy from Fish and Game whose responsibility to clean it up. He told me that.
Who?
That the fiasco meeting out of Smith River.
Oh, yeah.
Youngish, kind of skinny guy. Not big.
Jeff Stoddard.
They have a brand new tractor, they have a brand new mower that's probably never been out of their yard. And they could go out there and mow that Scotch broom off. Wouldn't be the best, but it would be better than what you got. And they could mow it this time of the year, or when the calves have to be gone, so that you're not interfering with nesting, and mow that Scotch broom down about 6 inches. It would be way better.
And spray it.
but they don't, I don't think they have money to run the mower and buy the diesel.
I bet you they don't even have anybody who knows how to run it.
Yeah, they do.
They do?
Yeah.
Okay, so the Elk Stakeholders Group, we keep hearing rumors that it might return, but yeah, at this point, I think it's purely rumors. I haven't heard anything.
Is Jack still on the line? Or has he left us? Has he abandoned us? Huh? Jack, can you tell us a little bit about the Elk Stakeholders Group that someone is trying to get started? Because we'd all like to be a part of that. Do you just have a little summary?
He's not there.
Hello, Jack?
I can tell you what I know, which is very little.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Okay.
What I know is that it's another newer group that's being organized, and it's being led by the
Cattlemen's?
Association. So
Justin Moore?
Justin Mora, Dean Hunt, Jason Hunt's son, I know are on the group, but it's a subcommittee of the Cattlemen's Association group.
Okay.
And beyond that, that's all I've heard. I haven't been part of that group locally. Justin Moore would be a good contact person if
Right.
anyone's interested.
Right.
So we'll go back to the moment. Thank you very much for that. I don't know what, I don't know what's going on with the stakeholders group. I know that Sean Freeze continues to.
Oh, sorry. I don't know what's going on with Stakeholders Group. Sean Freeze continues to say it's coming back, but don't hold your breath.
He told me February.
Yeah. We'll go back for just a moment to private lands. Mike had an addition.
On the private lands, and it also goes to the Elk Stakeholder Group, recently I was up at Del Norte Golf Course, and they are experiencing heavy damage due to the elk, and a lot of, they were giving me some man hours that it's taking to fix the greens and fairways, and they were very interested in trying to figure out how to get to be part of the SHARE program, to actually be able to hunt those elk. They're currently hazing them. Right now, as we speak, it's about between 11 and 1 a.m. that the elk are coming onto the course, and they're putting 40 to 50 hours a week in just trying to keep the course up from the damage that they're doing. So I just kind of wanted to add that to this meeting.
Is Gary still working there? Gary Early? Do you know? Yeah, see, Gary Early, who ran the Brookings course, had developed a reasonably effective system for keeping them off of the greens. The fairways, it's impossible. But he had a pretty good system for keeping them off the greens.
They're also down at the fairgrounds now, walking up and down between the horse stalls. So a horse is going to probably freak and jump out and have a crisis there.
I see him right next to Elk Valley Road by Hamrose. They must live right around there pretty close, like 30 feet off the road.
That's that same group.
They
that
bed down behind it, behind those buildings.
Another fine example of state fish and wildlife management program. So I guess we're down to Klamath Chinook listing. Any new information, Mike?
I don't have any information on the listing process itself. I know that the commission had voted to continue the abbreviated season of July 1st. And as far as I know, that's going to continue. As far as the listing process and where it's at in that, I do not know. I had a conversation with Jackie Hostler-Carmison from the State Commission about it. And we're, through the NorCal Guides and Sportsmen's Association, we're going to put a petition to delist due to the numbers that we've had at the Trinity over the last couple of years. that's a long process. You know, the delisting is way harder than the listing. So that's kind of where it's at.
So everybody, I think, on the commission got a copy of Jennifer's email to us, giving us a little bit of, oh, maybe not. I see this came to the RCD rather than to the commission, but Jennifer Jacobs sent a note to the RCD group, because we've been kind of pretty involved in every month that we meet, trying to find out what's going on with the Ditson and trying to help that along. She sent a note that says they put the units in on the 16th of September, and then through the 7th day of December, they had 7,500 fish pass through, going upstream at the site. And last year, they put the unit in on the exact same day, 9/16, and the total fish through 12/7 last year was 10,915. And so it's down by a quarter, roughly speaking, but there wasn't a whole lot of days this year with much in the way of water. So who knows how that all comes out in the long run, but they are in fact actually counting, which I think is a good thing.
I bet you that 75, out of that 7,500, it happened in about 5 days.
Well, it doesn't happen when there's no water, that's for sure. Okay, one more item that was on here, Mike, was about the elk attack. Did you ever hear much more, again, about that lady that was actually gored with the elk?
Yeah, I've talked to her a few different times, and she's recovered from it. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to attend a lot of the meetings after that. She didn't want to really pursue it any further. I kind of dropped the ball in not being here and not able to due to work and actually travel from where I'm living. But she was hurt pretty bad, and it's going to happen again. That Birch Ocean View Birch Track area over there is littered with those elk, and they're right in the neighborhoods, and there has to be something done. Unfortunately, when we've asked the stakeholders group or anybody else, they don't have any other way to deal with them besides hunting, and it's illegal to hunt them in the neighborhood. So it's a growing concern every day, and it's going to happen again. Luckily, she lived.
Luckily, she lived, and they're basically tame wild animals.
Yeah. In this case, just for everybody's knowledge, her puppy, 10-week-old puppy, ran out the door. Bull elk went after the puppy. She went to save her puppy, got her, pinned her down, broke several bones. I think it was 85 stitches total by the time she got out of it, and she sent me the pictures, and she took a beating, and she ended up spending several days in the hospital.
They might look pretty from the road, but be careful. So last item on the agenda tonight, any
Quick
information?
question. Did we want to keep that on the agenda or take it off?
I think we could take it off.
So the last item on the agenda is about the Sand Dune Scylla listing. Any info on that? I mean, it's probably going to happen, but hey.
Where's it at?
It's out in the sand dunes.
And it's soon to be covered when they remove the grass and never kill it anyway. Just saying.
So we have one more interesting thing. We have a potential new member who's actually, two new members, but we only have one in attendance. Oh, we get Steve also? I didn't hear about this other name, Steve, sorry.
Oh,
We have
I
two
didn't
new
either.
members in attendance, which is pretty great. That's cool. So Steve Avila, of course. Justin, you've been awfully quiet. awfully quiet. You got to learn to talk more in this group.
That's great.
Did you guys want to keep the sand dune on there or not?
It will probably come up, but none of us know about it, so it's not gonna help us much. Yeah, so,
It's not necessarily something, maybe it's not necessarily something that affects, hunting and fishing and lake access and so forth, but, you know.
well, with the sand dune restoration stuff, it probably will, that's why I was thinking, but how would any of us have any news on it?
We'll
We
keep,
won't.
Jeff will keep us informed, I'm sure.
Jeff will, yes.
So, okay. Anybody else have anything to report tonight at the meeting? So I suppose I'll exercise a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye, aye.
Okay.
Good night, thank you for coming.